Kota's haunted palace, Brij Raj Bhavan, is one such place in Kota, India, whose name, perhaps no Indian has not heard. Kota, 39, is a major hub for arty studies, but along with this, many secrets are hidden in Kota. There is a palace in Kota that people consider haunted. Kota's Brij Raj Bhavan Palace is about 200 years old and is now used as a hotel. But it is said that as beautiful and magnificent as this palace looks, its story is equally terrifying. However, Mohan, who was studying in a college in Kota, had no idea about this. Mohan was a history student, and for his project, he had to research 3 heritage buildings. And Mohan chose one of them, Kota's Brij Raj Bhavan Palace, and perhaps this mistake was going to cost him dearly. With special permission for research, one evening he reached the Brij Raj Bhavan Palace with his friend and project partner Shikha. Although one of Mohan's friends living in Kota had told him that the Brij Raj Bhavan Palace is considered haunted and they should leave before nightfall. But Mohan did not believe in such things. When Mohan and Shikha arrived there, the palace seemed completely normal, just like any other palace. Stone-built walls, large gardens, and beautiful carvings. Mohan and Shikha got so busy with the research of the palace that they didn't even realize when it became night. They were just about to leave the palace when Mohan felt a very cold gust of wind as he passed by a room in the palace. He stopped right there and started looking towards the closed door of that room. Mohan suddenly felt as if someone was sitting inside the room, crying. Mohan turned towards Shikha, but she was not there. While walking with him, Shikha suddenly disappeared. Meanwhile, the sound of crying coming from inside started getting louder. Mohan began to feel a slight sense of anxiety. He started calling out for Shikha. His voice seemed to echo throughout the palace, but there was no trace of Shikha, and the sound of crying coming from the room grew even louder. Mohan felt as if a man was growling in the pain and crying loudly. Trembling, Mohan went to the door and pressed his ear against it. But then, suddenly, the crying sound stopped. The door of the room was locked, so Mohan started peeking inside through the window on the door, but he couldn't see anyone inside. He was just about to leave, when suddenly the closed door opened on its own. Mohan couldn't understand how the door, which was just locked, suddenly opened on its own. Gathering courage, Mohan went inside through the door and saw a burly man sitting on a rotating chair in the corner of the room, with his back towards Mohan. The man was wearing a uniform, a British Indian Army uniform. Mohan saw that the man was sitting there, crying. Mohan called out to him and asked what had happened, but he did not respond. Mohan gathered courage and went up to him, and as soon as he placed his hand on the man's shoulder, Mohan's hand went right through his body. Suddenly, the man's neck twisted completely on its own. One of his eyes was burst, and the other was completely white. It seemed as if his entire face had decayed. He suddenly stopped crying and started giving strange commands in English, and then immediately after began laughing in a bizarre manner. Seeing all this, Mohan became very frightened and ran straight towards the door, but it was closed. Mohan tried very hard to open it, but it wouldn't budge. Just then, Mohan saw that the terrifying man was standing right in front of him, holding a rifle aimed at Mohan. All the lights in the room suddenly began to flicker. Mohan was now completely stunned. He felt that the last day of his life had come near. The man shouted loudly and fired his rifle. There was a very loud noise, and Mohan, screamed. Suddenly, Mohan felt as if someone had grabbed his shoulder and was calling his name. When he lifted his eyes, Shika was sitting in front of him, trying to bring Mohan back to consciousness. Seeing this, Mohan was completely astonished. He looked around, and everything was just as it was. The room was locked, and there was no one inside. Shika told Mohan that he had been staring at the room without saying anything for the past 15 minutes, and then suddenly screamed and fell down. At first, Mohan didn't understand what had just happened to him and what Shika was telling him. For a moment, he started to feel that maybe he was hallucinating. But later, when Shika told him what had happened, Mohan was shocked to his core. Shika said that outside the room where Mohan had stopped, there was an Englishman standing inside, wearing a uniform. That man was wearing a strange, old-fashioned British, Indian, army uniform. He watched Mohan for a while, through the window above the door, and then, when he went back inside, Mohan suddenly started screaming. After hearing this, Mohan realized that what happened to him was not a hallucination, but a terrifying reality that could frighten anyone to death. When Mohan inquired more about this palace, he found out that a top officer of the British Army used to live there. He was very fond of this palace. But during the freedom struggle, Indian soldiers broke into the palace and killed that British general. It is said that to this day, the spirit of that British officer haunts the Brij Raj Bhavan Palace and is waiting to take revenge. It is believed that the ghost does not harm anyone, but many people have seen that British officer doing various things there. Many watchmen there have also reported that while on duty, an invisible force would slap them. Moreover, it would give them orders in English. After that night, Mohan never went near that palace again. Whatever happened to him that night, Mohan will probably never be able to forget it. But friends, would you like to go? Do let us know in the comments if you would like to visit the Brij Raj Bhavan Palace in Kota.